Right, lesson 29 and part 2 of Pratyahara. Last week we had a general introduction to Pratyahara, the importance of it. And today we are going to have a look at some particular different kinds of approaches that you can use if you find yourself in a certain situation. You see at the introduction that there's this story of Aesop's story, the crow and the fox. It's a story, of course, about ego. I think that is clear. There are 4 different steps in Pratyahara. The first one is called Yatamana Pratyahara, which means progressive detachment. And progressive detachment is especially applicable to our ties with the past. And although we live in a world where we think that positive memories are good and negative memories, painful memories, are bad, that is actually not the case. In yoga, both cause loss of energy, because we function best if we are in the here and now, if we are functioning in the present. I will give you some examples of this. Because it's only human that we are constantly being confronted with memories. And worse, we hold on to them. Good memories as well as bad memories. When I was in my 20s, I used to go to southern France, and maybe I told you this story already, but it comes back here, because I met people who were not just living in the past, but who were stuck in the past. It was traumatic. It was related to the Second World War, occupation by Nazi Germany. And what I clearly noticed, that was in the 80s, the late 1980s, so that is about 35 years after the Second World War finished. We're much more now, away from that, of course. The more time passes, the less impact it has. But at that time, in France, especially in the small villages, there were many old people that have very vividly experienced the occupation by the Germans and have been imprisoned, put in camps and what have you by the Germans. Slave labor, what have you, for building defensive works. And so trauma, those people live with trauma. The people that can't handle that, the people that got stuck in that experience and keep reliving that experience, you find in every bar and coffee shop when you go to the villages. I was in the countryside, in the Dordogne, later in southern France also, and you see the same thing happening everywhere. You go to a bar to drink a coffee, or in the evening you drink a glass of wine or beer, and there are these old people that you see there every evening. Every time you pass by, you see those people sitting there with a drink in front of them, and they kind of spend most of their day sitting there. And whoever passes by is subjected to their stories about the war. And every day you hear the same stories again and again. What characterizes those people is that they haven't moved on. They have no job, so they live on social security, or they have a very simple job that is given to them by the government, like sweeping the streets or managing some kind of building, but something that they don't really have to think much, that they don't have to really do much effort for. It's just a kind of a maintenance given to them by the government. Those people have no life. Why is this important for us as yogis? Yoga is about having a life. Yoga is about discovering your true self, discovering your true characteristics, and eventually helping you towards your destiny. Not the one that is determined by your past, or by your culture, or by your education, or your upbringing, but the one that you feel deeply inside your heart. Everybody has a possibility to discover that. All you have to do is follow your feeling, follow your heart, literally. And you will more and more develop an image of where you really want to go, as opposed to where you are being conditioned to go. But to do that, you need to be in the present. If you keep going back to the past, you stay in the past. And you'll never liberate yourself from that imprisonment that will keep you from developing your heart's content. And of course it's tragic. Those people are traumatized, they are stuck. And that is of course a big problem. PTSD is a real thing, post-traumatic stress disorder. But there are also people like you and me who also have our memories of the past, but we have said we're not going to stay stuck there. We have other things to do. We have more important things to do. If you find yourself being stuck while actually knowing that that is not a good thing, then you have here Pratyahara as a tool to gradually start dealing with that consciously. You have to decide to take action from today and then actually go to work and do it. There is also good memories, melancholy, or the good old days. An example of that, I always use the situation of my two sisters. I have three sisters, but two of them are twins. And since they were born, they've always gotten a lot of attention because they're blonde, they have blue eyes, and they are twins. So everybody's saying, oh, so cute. And so they've always been in the middle of attention, and they're still meeting their elementary school teacher to have dinner with two of them. They meet them regularly. So they are in the meantime in their 70s, 80s. My sisters in the meantime are in their 50s. They're still meeting their elementary school teachers. But they went to middle school or secondary education. In Dutch, in Netherlands, you don't really have middle school and high school. It's secondary education. And because of their popularity, they were much engaged in show ballet, and they were a lot on TV also, in shows. They were professional dancers, basically. And in middle school, they had this huge group of people with whom they were friends. One of them got married with their first love from school. And those people, this whole group of friends, still meets. That is a good thing, you think, but this is what is happening. This is what the yogi sees. These people are in fact 17-year-old kids who are now 50 years old or 55 years old. They have gotten older, but they haven't moved on. They're still living in their school days. They really do, almost all of them. So whenever they have a chance, they gather in a coffee shop, or they go to a concert together, or they visit each other at home. And this is the picture that you see. The boys, who are now grown-up men, they really like the Godfather movies. You have this whole series of Godfather movies, of which there are side developments like Once Upon a Time in America, and there are many of those gangster movies related to the mafia in America. At the time that there were videos, they used to have the whole series of videos. Then came the CDs, and they used to replace all the videos with CDs. And whenever they meet they watch those movies over and over again. Worse, they start acting like mafia gangsters. Some of them maybe are, not in a big way, but you know, the Netherlands is a country of marijuana where it is relatively legal but not completely, so it's in the gray zone. So many of those are engaged in the running a coffee shop themselves, or grow shops where you can buy supplements or supplies on how to grow your own plants. What this is about is they are living and they feel good about clinging to those days that they were naughty boys and girls in middle school, high school. But they still are naughty little boys and girls. And there's no problem with that for them, unless you end up in an identity crisis and you ask yourself, who am I? Who am I really? Because the thing is, they cannot live without each other. This whole group clings together because they empower each other. If you would isolate them, separate them and isolate them, they would lose completely their identity and they would definitely end up in an identity crisis. They are perfectly happy like this, but what we see is it's impossible to develop an idea of your heart's content, to develop an idea of your true destiny. And I'm giving you these two examples, a negative one and a positive one, and both of them are relatively extreme. But many people, when they reach older age, end up often being full of regret. Why are they full of regret? Because all their lives they have focused on doing what they were conditioned to do. And one of the biggest things in that picture is, of course, the career, work. But then they end up getting old and finding out that it is too late to pursue their heart's content. Because they just don't have the energy anymore, they just don't have the inspiration anymore. So most people reaching older age are full of regrets for not having been able to fulfill their dreams, their deepest desires, when they were actually capable of doing that, when they were actually able of doing that. So, cherish your memories, good ones and the bad ones. The bad ones teach us a lot. The bad ones not only teach us a lot, they also fuel our ambitions to make this life better. But do not get stuck. That you end up sitting in a bar drinking wine and every day repeating the same story again and again, like those older people in southern France who have experienced the occupation by the Nazi Germany. And in the same way, like with my sisters who are part of this whole social group, some people, or you could be envious of this whole group. They go on a lot of interesting adventures and what have you. But on the other hand, they will never really develop a true self-image, because their image is the image of the group. And in the case of those guys who are so obsessed by everything mafia related, I have seen those guys from very spontaneous, friendly, cheeky guys turning into very serious and dark and tensed, because they started emulating, they started copying the behavior of the stars that they so admire in the mafia movies. So it's an extreme example, but it's something that you see on all levels. As children, we have the idols that we look up to, I looked up to Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee was an idol of me. Can be a rock star, can be a movie star. As children, you need something to pull you up with, to empower you, to inspire. But in an ideal situation, that is a temporary stage that you go through, only to eventually end up becoming a true individual with your own characteristics. But the reality is, if you look around, is that many people, also getting older, do not rise above that stage where they identify with people from outside, with idols. They do not rise above that, and they basically stay stuck there. So Yatamana Pratyahara means that you consciously start diverting your energy from those memories. So this is technically how Pratyahara works. You become conscious of your distraction, that you have a memory of the past, regardless of whether that is good or bad. You notice what it does with you. Both good memories and bad memories trigger an emotional reaction. When you notice that happening as a yogi, you will become conscious of that, or you should become conscious of that. You realize that that is a distraction, that that is keeping you away from what is really important in life, which is the current, the present moment, and what you see yourself achieving further down the road in the future. The past is the past, you cannot turn back the clock. But because we're only human, we are easily drawn back to the past. So the moment that you are drawn back to the past and you are conscious of that moment, you must step in, detach from the memory, and redirect your attention to something that is in the present or in the future. Remember what I told you about my conversation with Ajita last week. I was stuck in the past. And Ajita said, don't talk about your past. Just tell me what you want. Okay, if that is what you want, how are you going to achieve it? Okay, if that is, you already know how to achieve, what you must do to achieve it. So from now on, stop thinking about the past and go to work. Step by step, do what you need to do to get where you want to be. And that's the best advice I ever got. That is Pratyahara. So every time I felt being drawn back into my misery or my brother's misery, I consciously took back my energy from that thought or that emotion and redirected it towards my project of eventually being able to go to Korea. So I focused on my studies, both with Ajita and in school, and continued to work to earn enough money. And from that moment on that I had that conversation with Ajita, everything developed and started going smooth. Before that conversation, I was totally stuck. I dropped out of his course twice. I dropped out of school twice. It was a tragedy. The second stage of Pratyahara is Vyatireka Pratyahara. Vyatireka is exclusive detachment. And this applies especially to addictions. There are different kinds of addictions. There are also addictions that we don't consider addictions, for example, in relationships. But let's first have an addiction that I dealt with in this way. Gradual approach. When you're addicted to smoking, drinking, eating, or any kind of addiction, You have to start approaching it very consciously. And let me tell you, when I started practicing yoga, I was a smoker. I smoked habitually. But when I started practicing yoga, and before I learned about how this works, I hadn't studied yet with Ajita, so my development was based on my practice, but not studying yet. So this happened naturally. I became aware of my smoking habit, and of course the fact that it is a very bad thing to do. So then I became aware of my struggle, my inability to stop smoking. If I look back now, I just cannot understand that I couldn't stop smoking, but everybody who has smoked knows how difficult it is to actually stop. It is almost impossible. So what did I do? I started looking for information. And all information that you read about smoking is bad. And I started writing down every bad aspect of smoking on A4 size papers, and I put it on the wall above my desk. And I ended up covering the whole wall. There were like 40, 50 A4 size pieces of paper. So each of them with a negative aspect of smoking. If you ask me now, can you tell me all those negative aspects of smoking? I don't know, but there are so many. And the thing is, just because you research it and write it down, it makes you very conscious of your motivation, why you not only want to, but must stop with that bad habit. And you put it on the wall above your desk, or a place where you spend lots of time, and you're constantly looking at it, consciously, but more subconsciously. So it's something that implants in your consciousness. And then a very interesting process started. What many smokers do, people who are addicted to smoking, the first thing they do when they wake up is light a cigarette. Before doing anything else, you light a cigarette. So I postponed the first cigarette of the day. I moved it to after breakfast. Then after a couple of weeks, I moved it from breakfast to coffee time, around 11 o'clock. Then when I had that under control, I moved it after lunch. Then I moved it to after tea, around 4 o'clock. Have a cigarette while having tea. So I ended up having just one cigarette in the evening when the day was done. And in Holland we roll our own cigarettes. You can buy prepared cigarettes, but we also have what we call tobacco shack. You roll your own cigarettes, and those cigarettes I made them smaller and smaller. And in the end I had a very small cigarette in the evening, 2-3 draws, and I snuffed it out. And then one day, just totally without any pressure, without any force, I was done with it. Naturally. It took a long time, but no pain, no force. And most people who try to quit smoking or any other addiction under force, they almost always fail. They almost always fall back. That is this approach. It's a little bit scientific, but it's a little bit playful also. You just continue doing what you did, but you do it consciously. And this is the whole thing in yoga. Yoga doesn't mean that you become an ascetic, a fakir who only eats plants, roots, and drinks water. That is not realistic. For us, as being people who just live in society, we are not living in a temple or far away in the woods or the mountains. We are living in society. We stay human, we stay normal, but with a new dimension. It's the dimension of consciousness. And you accept, very important, that you are only human. That's very important. Because perfection doesn't exist. But from there, you slowly start to transform your life towards what feels good to you. And bad habits will automatically, sooner or later, or systematically one after the other, be dealt with. And doesn't mean, if you like to drink, it doesn't mean that you will completely stop drinking, but you will start drinking sensibly. Smoking is another story. There is no such thing as smoking sensibly, because even one draw of a cigarette is damaging the lungs. But a small glass of wine on a regular basis, it's even healthy. It's good for the heart, it's good for the blood circulation, for the blood pressure, etc. But the problem is, of course, if one glass becomes a whole bottle, then it turns into a poison. And that applies to many things. That applies to sugar, that applies to fat, it applies to many things. Smoking, there's no such thing as sensible smoking. Just one draw of a cigarette is harmful already. So be human, but stay in control. There is actually a concept in yoga. I know June is going to smile when I mention the word. It's called boga. And boga is enjoyment. But because it's yoga, it's not just enjoyment. Because just enjoyment is always the problem. Boga is conscious enjoyment. So do what you do, but do it conscious from now on. And if you feel that there is harmful effects from it, you naturally want to change it. And that's what happens when you do it consciously. If you wake up every morning with a headache because you drink 1 or 2 glasses too many, if it is boga, you make the link and you say, hey, it's my drinking of 3 glasses instead of 1. That causes my headache every morning, and I really hate these headaches every morning. So I have to bring it under control. That is boga. Boga is not being perfect, it's enjoyment, but consciously. We will come back to that with the 4th form of Pratyahara. Addiction is also related, can be related to relationships, especially when relationships are not good, but we find ourselves incapable of getting out of a relationship. Sometimes relationships are abusive, or there is no love, but the partners stay together, and people start to suffer. And for the same reasons that we mentioned before, you get stuck and you stop developing, you stop evolving, and you lose connection with your heart's content. So it's like with an addiction to a substance. If you find yourself in a situation where you're really stuck in a relation where you've done everything that you could to make it better, and the partner is not cooperative or even abusive, but there are many ties. Maybe you bought a house together, maybe you have a child, maybe if there are children in play, it's another story, because the child should be not become the victim, but in the end, when you're stuck in a relationship and you kind of feel like you're dying, because that's how I have experienced it in the past, spiritually dying as a result, like with smoking or alcohol, make a list and make 2 columns, one with reasons why you should stay in the relationship, and one with reasons why you should end the relationship. And because you do this very consciously, rationally, you get a very clear picture of what you need to do next. The problem is when we are stuck in a relationship is often that we just don't have a clear oversight. But the moment that you start writing things down, rationally, step by step, then it becomes clear. And if you give it time, you will know what to do next. Good. Then we have Ekandriya Pratyahara. Ekandriya, Indriya is senses. So taste, smell, touch, eyesight and hearing. Indriya. Eka means one. So if the previous two methods of Pratyahara do not work for the situation that you are dealing with, you approach it in a scientific way, a very systematic way. You try to determine which chakra is involved. You remember that the chakras are related to the senses. Muladhara chakra is related to smell. Svadhisthana chakra is related to taste. Manipura chakra is related to eyesight. Anahata chakra is related to touch. And Vishuddhi chakra is related to hearing. Now the most important are of course the three chakras below the diaphragm. Smell, taste and eyesight. The marketing industry uses especially eyesight. The image of the Marlboro cowboy comes to mind. The way that McDonald's lures little children to their fast food restaurants with Happy Meals, with these little toys that really intrigue kids, wanting to belong to the family with the clown and what have you. Eyesight is a very big element of manipulation for the marketing industry. But when you talk about smoking or drinking or eating of fast foods or foods that contain huge amounts of nutrients that are not so healthy for us, like sugar and fat and what have you, or chemicals. If you find yourself struggling to get rid of the habit, you determine which of the senses you are mostly appealed to by the object of your addiction, and you then consciously withdraw your energy from that particular chakra and you redirect it to an object of your choosing. I find this method, the third one, not so practical because it is just too scientific, too complicated in a sense, because it is already covered by the previous ones, except that you are not really looking at each of the chakras or each of the senses. So that brings us to the fourth and the final step, which is the one that I like most, because it acknowledges first and foremost that you're only human, including all the weaknesses that you have and your strengths, of course. But we wouldn't need Pratyahara for our strengths, we need it for our weaknesses. And you approach it in a playful way. So I always use this example. If you go to the Netherlands, if you have been to the Netherlands, you walk in the streets early in the morning and you can smell the smell of fresh bread. Do you know the smell of fresh bread, freshly baked bread? The bakers, the traditional bakers, they start in the middle of the night to knead the dough. Then all the bread goes into the oven around 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. So the streets are full of the smell of freshly baked bread. In France also, with the baguettes and the croissants. That smell is just so enticing. So the smell is actually much better than the actual taste. But fresh bread, if it's still a little bit crispy, the crust and what have you, yeah, there's no comparison with that. But the thing is, you go to the bakery to buy 2 whole wheat loaves of bread, but you're surrounded with this smell. And the bakers just like the marketing industry, they're not stupid. Because while you are standing there asking for your whole wheat, which is on your shopping list, you see all these beautifully displayed pastries with whipped cream, lots of sugar and chocolate. Delicious. They put that right in front of you while you're ordering your healthy bread, and the smell, and it's very difficult to resist. That's why they put them right in front of you behind the glass window, so that you not only leave the shop with only your 2 healthy loaves of whole wheat bread, but bring some pastries with you. That's good. Enjoyment is also spiritual, unless it starts destroying your energy. If you take too much of something, if you enjoy too much of something, it actually brings you down. But conscious enjoyment, that is within certain boundaries, actually elevates the spirit. That is what nouveau cuisine is about, with those very small portions of some very delicious foods that do not fill you up, but that give you a real sense of heaven. If you overeat, then you crash. It's the same with pastries. I grew up relatively poor, so pastries were only there with special occasions. On a birthday. For the rest, we would always stick to the shopping list and only come home with the whole wheat bread. But if you have some extra money in your wallet, why not? So you come home with pastries. When you do, enjoy it. But when you start noticing that the contents is bringing you down, is destroying your energies, making you crash, then you have to start taking control of the situation. This applies to snack bars. Have you been in Holland? Snack bars, you know, Dutch snacks? In Korea you have the punchik chip. In Holland you have the snack bar. Dutch snack bars, almost all the snacks are deep fried. And deep fried food smells so delicious, irresistible. But not healthy. Most of it is not healthy. And they have such a huge assortment of snacks. It's just amazing. So if you happen to live in a street where there is a snack bar, and they are everywhere, so you pass by on your way to the bus, on your way to work, or on your way to shopping, you cannot avoid passing by the snack bar. The snack bar has this exhaust from the kitchen, and it blows this smell of deep fried snacks into the streets. And just like with the bakery shop, it smells so nice that it's very difficult not to go inside and order some delicious kind of croquette or French fries or what have you. So difficult to resist. So, good. Once in a while you need something like that just to enjoy. And the thing is, when you become wealthier, you have some extra money in your wallet beyond your daily shoppings, then it can become a problem. Then it can become a habit that actually leads to heart problems, diabetes, overweight, and what have you. So we're dealing here with smell. We're dealing here also with the side of people consuming these delicious kind of things. Like with the example that I explained you about smoking, if you are struggling with bread or the products that they sell on the side, or with the snacks from the snack bar, just start playing with it. You're a yogi, you have enjoyed these kind of things, but you are now conscious that it's something that you need to bring under control. It's not something you have to avoid completely, but you have to bring it under control. So you make yourself a shopping list, and you leave your home to go shopping with the resolve to stick to the shopping list. You're not going to buy anything outside of the shopping list. You go to the bakery shop and you order your bread rolls and you order your whole wheat bread, and you try to not be lured into buying things that are off your list. Now, if you succeed, you leave the shop, you feel incredibly proud of yourself, because it's really empowering when you have succeeded to actually control your urge to bring something extra home. But there are also days that you cannot resist. Although it was not on your shopping list, you ended up bringing it home anyway. And when that happens, do not beat yourself over the head in a guilt trip or anything like that. Just enjoy it. But enjoy it fully and enjoy it consciously. So first you enjoy it, and then you look what it does with you. Then you look at how it affects you. And when you're not conditioned by something like yoga, you may not actually notice that much. But when you're a yoga practitioner and you become healthier and stronger and more full of energy, it is also more easily affected by negative influences like smoking, drinking, eating, sugar, all the kinds of things that kind of affect energy and conditioning. So as a yogi, you become more and more aware of that. And that is where you step in, start to take control. But the fourth method here is one that allows you, first of all, to be human, and it allows you room to play. Why is this important? As long as you play, energy is circulating. But the moment that you become stressed, filled with guilt, what have you, energy gets blocked. Is that bad? Yes, because consciousness is only there when energy is circulating freely. So play. And when you find yourself ridden with guilt, tell yourself, yeah, but I'm only human. And of course you can use that as an excuse, but you are a yogi and you know about truthfulness. You know about the yamas and the niyamas, purity. So you also know that when you start using being human as an excuse for an addiction, that you're not being truthful anymore, that your motivation is not being pure anymore. So you have your guardrails there, which you try, of course, to stay within. Keep it playful, stay human, and gradually take control. Questions? Okay, let's take a short break.